thing about personality cults is that you really cannot make any distinction between the cult leader and the cult followers. They're all of the same cloth. They're all of the same substance. They all drink the Kool-Aid. That's why I am as contemptuous of Trump supporters, including their former friends and allies in those ranks, but I am as contemptuous of them as I am of Donald Trump himself. And maybe even more so for Trumplicans, because a lot of Trumplicans should have known better. They used to know better. And now they've willingly thrown that aside. They've willingly jettisoned their principles. They've given up. They have become what they once stood against. And it's reflected in their speech patterns, their Trump-like speech patterns. Jay Nordlinger was musing about that on Monday at nationalreview.com. All groups and movements develop their own lexicon, their own terms, often slurs. Take the Chinese Communist Party. They had running dog capitalist, right-wing deviationist, etc. In Hoxha's Albania, they said Titoist. It wasn't a compliment. I would like to talk about the Trump movement, the Trump army. I'm not going to talk about the alt people. I'm not going to talk about the Nazis or the fascists or the racists or the identitarians. I may address them another day. I would probably entitle that piece Nazis in my notifications. Almost every day I need to weed the Nazis out of my notifications on Twitter. These are people who celebrate the Holocaust when they're not denying it. They tweet pictures of crematoria and the like. The alt people, the alt-right or alternative right, which is really the left, use the word cuck a lot. That stands for cuckold. The alts believe that the conservatives let dark-skinned people come in and rape their women and take over the country. Hence, they are cucks. So, we are called cuckservatives, led by William F. Cuckley. This is the way they talk. This is the way you people, you Trumplicans talk. You own this. You own this. You have voluntarily gotten on that despicable train. You have voluntarily drunk the Kool-Aid. You own this. But forget them for now. Today I will talk about the lexicon of Trump partisans, or many of them. They come after me on Twitter and in comment sections under articles and blog posts. I've been scanning such things recently. The mindset is, of course, collectivist, and so is the vocabulary. People use the same words, whether the words are sensible or truthful or not. It's like an army of parrots squawking. I wonder whether the birds know what they're talking about. Well, you can make an argument both ways, I suppose. I think the most prominent word from Trumplicans is globalist. That is their epithet of choice. Seems to have replaced cosmopolitan or rootless cosmopolitan, a once common slur against Jews. It's one of those nonsense words of the populist right. In all likelihood, they think you're for trade, or for alliances, or for general involvement in the world. Certainly, certainly they think you're not a patriot. They think you're subordinate the national interest to a fuzzy global interest. One dictionary definition of globalism is the attitude or policy of placing the interests of the entire world above those of individual nations. We, of course, have been making the case for sovereignty in the nation-state for years. And there were years when sovereignty in the nation-state were an exceptionally bad odor. I thrilled Jeremy Rabkin, for example, a guru in sovereignty. Anyway, this means nothing to Trumplican critics of none of the above. I've also seen the term globalist pig thrown about. Pig is a perennial, I suppose. Left-wing radicals refer to policemen as pigs and still do. Then there was capitalist pig. Not long ago, a Trump man tweeted at me, "There's no more liberal and conservative. It's just nationalist versus globalist." The tweeter thought himself on the side of the angels, the hell's angels. Then we have open borders. They will always charge that you are for open borders, even if you've been arguing for a restrictionist immigration policy for your entire career, and at some cost to yourself. We have caught hell from some conservatives and many libertarians for a very long time. That is because we have been restrictionist. For our pains, we have been called nativist, xenophobic, and worse. Trumplicans either don't know this, or more likely don't care. To them, because we, or some of us, are anti-Trump, we are open borders. I suspect this is just a slur. The words open borders have no meaning, no content beyond the slur. In other words, it's just another extended middle finger. A tribalist slur. Facts have no meaning to these people. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. When they say you're for open borders, they don't mean you're for open borders. They mean something closer to bleep you. In Cambodia, a small handful of Khmer Rouge criminals have been put on trial. One of them oversaw a prison where almost every inmate was tortured to death. The prison was Tuol Sleng, or S21, and its overseer was Kaing Gwek Eve, nicknamed Duke. Some 16,000 people went into S21. 7 are known to have survived. One of them, a man named Chum May, was able to question Duke at trial. Chum May asked, "Why did you keep saying that we work for the CIA?" Duke answered, "The real CIA is different from people accused by the regime of being CIA. You were identified as someone who opposed the regime. That's why we called you CIA." And in Hoxite, Albania, when they called you a Titoist, they didn't really mean that you were for Tito or working for him. They meant that you opposed the regime or were suspected of doing so. It's quite the company that you're keeping, Trumplicans. When a Trumplican says that someone like me is for open borders, he does not mean that we are for open borders. He means nothing more, really, than, "You don't support the candidate I support, so bleep you!" Open borders for Israel. You hear that from some Trump people. It is a taunt. I think they mean that anti-Trump people put Israel above all, certainly above America, like there's any necessary conflict. And if anti-Trumpers want open borders for America, they should surely want it for Israel, which would destroy Israel, so ha-ha. As far as I know, that's why these guys say open borders for Israel. They also call us Israel firsters. Is this starting to sound more than a little anti-Semitic to you? And I say that as a person of German heritage. They are for America first, using the old isolationist slogan. So the rest of us are Israel firsters, you see. Relatedly, we are neocons, and I still don't see what the problem is with that designation. Not that these Trumplicans have the slightest idea what a neocon is. They're as ignorant as their Cheeto-faced cult leader. They have a vague sense that it means warmongering globalist. The alt-rightists often say neo-Cohen. Get it? Get it? Huh? 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 On Twitter some weeks ago, I noted that both Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un had praised Donald Trump. I said something like, rule of thumb, the GOP presidential nominee should not be endorsed by Putin or Kim. A Trumpster, a Trumplican tweeted back at me, "No, that's the neocon rule of thumb." At least you didn't say Neo-Cohen. But that is the level of understanding of Trumplicans. Perpetually, people like me, conservative Trump critics, are charged with desiring perpetual war or endless war. No, you got to fight sometimes to prevent war, or prevent a bigger one. Case in point, do you think that the Second World War the full-fledged Second World War would have broken out if the British and French had preemptively occupied the Ruhr Valley in Germany in the mid-30s, after the Germans reoccupied the Rhineland in violation of the Treaty of Versailles? It's historically documented fact that had the British and French done that, the German military establishment would have overthrown Hitler. That's what gave Hitler his larger-than-life persona. I mean, he was proven right each and every time. He had the measure of the British and the French. He knew that they weren't going to stop him. But if they had stopped him, he would have been discredited and he would have been removed. Anyway, perpetually, people like me, conservative Trump critics, are charged with desiring perpetual war or endless war. This is an ancient charge, incidentally, and its pedigree is malodorous. Every day we hear that we are the GOP. That's rich. The E stands for establishment. In the Trumplican mind, people like me are the man whom the Donald and his forces are standing up to. Even though Trump is the man now, and the establishment is backing him up. You don't seem to have a problem with the establishment now. What if I said about the GOP establishment all along? That they are conventionalists, not counter-revolutionaries. They're mercenary. They don't have any ideological bearings or ideological roots. They're now doing Trump's bidding at the Trumpvention this week in Cleveland. I once wrote an essay on the use and abuse of the word establishment, and I won't recapitulate it here. Suffice it to say that I think people should make arguments for and against various policies without recourse to boogie words such as establishment. Say what you believe and why, if you can. Then there's Rhino. It stands for Republican in name only, and it's a constant Trumplican charge, which is odd on at least two levels. First, many Trump people despise the GOP, so for them to question other people's Republican loyalty is odd indeed. But second, their man, their hero, is genuinely a rhino, a lifelong liberal Democrat who got into the Republican primaries when he saw a populist opening. In any event, my critics can spare me the rhino charge because I left the Republican Party when Donald Trump cinched the Republican nomination, proving that the Republican Party had left me, had left us. In other words, when Trump fundamentally transformed it. Donor class. You hear this a lot. It's a pejorative, of course. Probably every candidate for office receives donations from people who support him. Trump has said that he is self-funding, which is another fraud and lie. But that is evidently not true. So he too has donors. Do they belong to the donor class? One of the reasons I rejected the left many years ago is that they spoke constantly of class. No one could be an individual. Everyone had to be shoved into a group. I now hear the same kind of language, ideological language, extremist language, from the right. The right has become the left, or at least the former right. They switch sides, in other words. Now you have the socialist left and the fascist left. So the right has been disenfranchised. Someone said to me recently, you're working for your donor class overlords. This is kind of funny when the initial shock wears off. Memo to donor class overlords or would-be overlords. We could use some. Believe me. Give us a call. By the way, as a devotee of Turkish cuisine, I certainly belong to the doner class. I guess I don't know anything about Turkish cuisine, but Jay Nordlinger does, apparently. More on this class stuff. Not since I was a student surrounded by Marxists have I heard so much talk about class, or such expressions of class envy, and it all comes from the Trump army. Someone told me, keep drinking wine and eating brie in your New York penthouse. Do Trump folk know whom they're supporting? Have they ever heard of Trump Tower? Do they realize I'm a magazine staffer? You see what I mean. Wish I was a magazine staffer. When you're in my business, you hear a lot about cocktail parties. The right charges you with tailoring your views to cocktail parties. As they tell it, you have to toe the liberal line or your invitations to cocktail parties will dry up. This is so divorced from reality, it's hard to know what to say. Most of us would rather be home typing in our pajamas or less than attending cocktail parties. And I have news for the Trumplican left. Conservatives like me are as unwanted by lefties as they are by Trumplicans, who are also lefties. One side hates us for being Neanderthals, the other side hates us for not being Neanderthals. Elitist is another charge, of course. Trump partisans fancy themselves tribunes of the people, or the people themselves. We the people, they like to say. The rest of us are non-people, I guess. The charge of elitism is especially stupid and irksome. I've spoken of my rejection of the left when I was in my teens. One reason I rejected them is that they obviously disdained ordinary people. People who, as Barack Obama would later say, cling to their guns and religion. And people who call you elitist, they're apt to know nothing. Nothing at all about you. It's not about ideology. Well, they obviously don't care about ideology because they blew theirs overboard to support Trump. This is something I hear from Trump folk when I or someone else points out that Trump is not a conservative or that he takes left-leaning positions or outright leftist positions, as on, for example, health care. The related phrase is, it's not about box checking. What do they mean by this? I think they mean no fair talking about issues, no fair talking about the federal debt or taxation or entitlements or trade or gun control or abortion or NATO or affirmative action or ethanol subsidies. In other words, they're admitting implicitly that Trump isn't a conservative and they don't care. In fact, they're just fine with it. They've forfeited their principles. They have become the enemy. Positions don't matter. Thinking doesn't matter. And nobody could be thinking and support Donald Trump. What matters is that Donald Trump is a big, strong man, and that's what this country needs now. But what does he stand for? We know what he stands for. Himself. And whatever's left over, liberalism. He's a liberal Democrat who has taken over the Republican Party. Period. Exclamation point. You recall what recruiters from Trump University were told? Sell feelings, not solutions. That sounds right out of the Barack Obama or Bill Clinton playbook, doesn't it? And this one's my personal favorite. You're for Hillary! Another vote for Hillary! This sort of thing trips from Trumplican lips 24/7. If, like me, you are not voting for either Trump or Hillary because you regard both as unfit, Trump folk will say that you're for Hillary, period. Well, let me tell you something, Trumplicans. I was fighting Hillary in every way I could when Trump was her great friend and supporter and funder, and by the way, he's still all those things, insisting that she be at his wedding in the first pew. My friend Bill Kristol was leading the fight against Hillary Care, as we call the precursor to Obamacare, when Trump was waging his personal Vietnam, i.e. dodging venereal disease when betting his broads. I think Trump was for single-payer health care then, too, to the extent he thought about it. It's not much. Anyway, we don't need any lectures on Hillary Clinton. Yet I think that psychologically it's very important to Trump people that the likes of us be for Hillary. I think they would rather shout, "Hillary!" than defend Trump's fitness for office. Because they can't. Note this, too. For months, the Trumplicans told us that we were irrelevant. We were the gope. We were past it. They didn't need us. We were yesterday's news. Besides which, Trump was bringing millions and millions of new people to the polls, which never really materialized. People who had dropped out of the political process or had never entered it. The whole electoral calculus was changed. And now, if I don't go to the old folks' home on the Upper West Side of Manhattan on the relevant Tuesday in November, I'm going to be responsible for President Hillary Rodham Clinton? No. You are, Trumplicans, because you shoved down our throats the only candidate that can't beat Hillary Clinton. You have guaranteed President Hillary. Congratulations. I'm not going to be responsible for that. I'm not, and I'm, if it were possible, I wouldn't be responsible for President Donald J. Trump. None of the above. Their time is over, they often tell me. I want to reply, I had a time? Who knew? I wish somebody had told me. I might have enjoyed my time. That was a Maynard Ferguson song back in the day, as a matter of fact. Among the many other things they are, Trumplicans are definers and arbiters of self-proclaimed arbiters of conservatism. They are some combination of Edmund Burke and Russell Kirk in their minds. They say that George Will is not a conservative. Will is, of course, a classic conservative. Plus, he knows more about conservatism in a follicle of his hair than the Trump army does collectively. But to them, Will is no conservative. In other words, they've fundamentally transformed the definition of conservative to align with progressivism. They tell Mona Charen that she is not a conservative. She worked in the Reagan White House. She's been on the front lines for decades. They don't care, because they get to make up their own facts. That's another common trait of the left. For them, conservatism can be summed up in one 4-syllable phrase: Donald J. Trump. That'll tell you how banana balls Trumplicans have become. If they want to call themselves nationalists or populists or protectionists or Buchananites, nativists, identitarians, Trumplicans, whatever, but they insist, some of them, that they are conservatives and that all others are heretics, which is bullshit. Earlier I spoke of Trumplicans who say that they are nationalists in opposition to globalists. There's no more liberal and conservative. It's just nationalist versus globalist. To me, this is slightly more palatable than the One True Conservative Act, but not by much. And this one, I don't even know what to say to this one. You've never criticized Obama! You never criticized Obama, huh? We hear this from angry Trump supporters. Honestly, we hear, you never criticized Obama! Obviously, criers of such phrases have never read anything I've written or National Review, know nothing about it. We've devoted every issue since 2008, and most covers probably, to criticism of Obama. That does not obligate us to declare Trump fit for office, because he's not. Because he's not conservative, he's not Republican. He's a liberal Democrat who has hostilely taken over the Republican Party, and you Trumplicans are You're too much. You're too idiotic to even be willing to come to grips with it. How badly you've been played. How badly you've been bilked and swindled. The primary is over. I hear this from Trump folk increasingly. What they mean is, shut up! No more criticism of Trump! I heard that from Douglas. That's why I'm no longer on politicalpistachio.com or Constitution Radio. No more criticism of Trump. The right has spoken. The right has selected his presidential nominee. Shut up and get on board. Well, that's un-American when you really think about it. Also, I think of a response from an American general. Nuts. Nobody is obligated to surrender his conscience. On the contrary, we're the only ones who still have our consciences. Ever and always there is the threat. There are always the threats when it comes to Trump world. Explicit or implicit, that things will be very bad for anti-Trump conservatives once the Donald wins, if he were to win. Just you wait. You'll get yours. You had to board the Trump train or get run over, and get run over you will. Your time is up. What do they mean? Shunning? Kneecapping? Bullet to the back of the head? Some Vorkuta planned in Maine, maybe? Their candidate's style is belligerent, and so is theirs. Unity! Never has there been a closer marriage of candidate and core supporters. This includes respect for the truth. If it's to Trump's advantage to imply that a rival's father had a hand in the Kennedy assassination, he will. If a Trumplican needs psychologically to tell you you're for open borders or for Hillary, he will. Live not by lies. I mean, no one can stop you, but it's a lousy and dishonorable way to live.